a problem here.
So, what's the plan?
What's your plan?
What are your plans?
What's the plan?
What's the plan?
What's your plan?
What's your plan of action?
Plan.
What's the plan?
So, what is the plan?
Wait, I have a plan.
I have a plan.
I have a plan.
That's the plan.
I have a plan here.
This plan's gonna work. Master Plan, Phase 1, Side A.
I love everything about your plan.
भाई इससे कहते हैं planning.
What's it say?
Well, it says, I love it when a plan comes together.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and please take your seats for the closing. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin our first speech for the closing, I'd like to invite Mr. Mark Kalmbach, UN Volunteer Civil Affairs Officer with UNMO, the United Nations Mission in Liberia. Mark.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the Blue Rooms Talk team for a great job in taking care of us, in supporting us as a team and as individuals. That was nothing less than fantastic. Blue Room Talks, I think you agree with me that we heard yesterday 9 powerful contributions that showed us how significantly volunteer deployments can change the lives and existence of countless individuals, communities, societies, and whole countries. We were confronted with examples from different fields like education, human rights, translation services, and others, but UN volunteers' activities also extend into the field of civil affairs, political affairs, and not to forget the colleagues in the technical support in UN field missions as well as headquarters. But the service as a volunteer also changes and develops the life and personality of the volunteer and his or her family as well. My friend and colleague said it's an opportunity. It helps to gain experience and skills that open doors for future careers. It opens ears, eyes, and hearts for people from other countries and cultures. It deepens the understanding of their problems. UNV takes its volunteers to countries they would never have seen otherwise, or virtually assist others across the globe. A UNV deployment gives one the chance to work in a truly multinational work environment and with the population and partners of the host country. Not only the individual, but also the home country benefit from this after returning. A fantastic experience no money can buy. Such assignments need a lot of endurance and determination, but we have also heard how little things can make a big difference. The contribution of my colleague with the biscuits at the school as an incentive, or the school meal programs are excellent examples, and I made the same experience before, but not just with school children. Yes, in my own case as a civil affairs officer in Liberia, I was able to keep the peace in many ways, in communities and for the people. Sources of conflict are many. Dissatisfaction regarding social agreements in concession areas, disputes associated with land and property ownership, as well as traditional and religious affairs, just to mention a few. There were many ways for me and my colleagues to come in to settle conflicts. Mediation and support for local governments and traditional leaders are just a few. With hands-on mentoring, I support local authorities and NGOs, liaise with UN agencies and international partners and stakeholders. With quick impact projects, we build schools, police stations, border posts, and fund women and agricultural projects, just to mention a few. But many of us also took the opportunity and friendly relationships with our national colleagues to encourage them to apply for international positions. Plenty of them succeeded, with all the positive effects for them, their families, communities, and home countries. But we should also bear in mind that the deployment as a UN volunteer, as rewarding as it might be, also comes with hardship for many. One leaves the families behind. Living and working conditions are challenging and sometimes dangerous. I'm happy to say, after 6 years as a volunteer in 3 countries, that the UN in general and the UNV support offices in the different countries in particular do their best to minimize these effects. UNV gives us as UN volunteers an opportunity to become global citizens and supports us in every way to make sure our assignments have a true impact on peace and development wherever we are. You as partners in this journey with us will not only support a UN organization, but the spirit and dedication of volunteering worldwide.
Thank you, Mark. That was inspiring. We'd now hear from Ms. Sarah Poole, the Deputy Assistant Administrator from the United Nations Development Program.
Thank you very much, colleagues and friends. I've been asked to wrap up, which I always find a big challenge, especially after the rich discussions we've had together over the past day and a half. And here I would say, of course, the discussions that we've had in the formal sessions, but I think also the interactions that I've been participating in, overhearing in the different breakouts, during the coffee, during the network, during the great dinner last night in the lovely city of Bonn. So I think there's really a collective energy that translates through the formal and the informal interaction. Some colleagues have said throughout the past day and a half, in a way we're preaching to the converted. I don't think there's anyone in this room who doesn't know the 2030 agenda, doesn't believe in it, isn't passionate about it, and isn't committed to it. I think we also have some consistent messages coming around as to how we collectively can take this forward, draw more commitment, draw more action. And I've just, rather than trying to wrap up the richness of the discussions, I've just tried to reflect on a few takeaways that I'll be bringing back with me, back to New York, to UNDP, but also to all of the partners, whether it's UN, our civil society, the volunteers that we work with in the private sector, and of course the governments. So let me just share these with you. The first is we need to do development differently. This came up in the framing session yesterday, and I think it's something that we can all agree that it resonates with us. It's not the time for business as usual. The time is now. We have 14 years for this agenda. When I first heard that, 14 years seems like a relatively long time. I'll probably be retired at that point. Our youth volunteers will be in their 20s and 30s. We have a long spectrum on it. But I was quite struck when the colleagues were talking today about when the iPhone was introduced and the impact that's made in so much of our lives and the society over a short period of time. And when we think about that challenge of 14 years, we really have to think about upping the game and really seizing those opportunities in front of us. And within that, I would highlight, let's say, 2 aspects of how I think that we can do development differently. And one, I'm very happy to say, because of course it's the theme of what convenes us together, is the issue of partnerships. And I really appreciate, I think we've had some very honest reflections on partnerships and very good insight in terms of how we can take this forward. The first being that it's not always easy. We talk about partnerships, we have great examples of partnerships, but we know that those partnerships just don't come about immediately because we have a good idea or because we like each other. We need to find common ground. We need to put trust in each other. We need to be inspired by others, whether it's by our partnerships or by broader society as a whole. We also have to draw on our comparative advantage. We know that we have them, But a partnership can't just be about duplicating what we bring. I think yesterday there was a quote, I've also seen it on Twitter, so Twilly will be very happy, that alignment is not change. We really need to draw the comparative advantage and find how we can provoke those and really push the limit to make something meaningful. We also have to be pragmatic. Starting small is not bad. Sometimes starting small is what is really going to get us the results that we can scale up. And that multi-stakeholder, while it sounds like a very UNE's term that we use, really means multi-stakeholder. It means engaging across governments, and here I mean local, national. It means working with the private sector, national, international. It means the civil society. It means the volunteers. It means the UN agencies, all of the bilaterals, everyone that's committed to this agenda, and seeing how we can draw this out. The second point that I would really highlight is impact. It came up time and time again. I'm glad that there's a session this afternoon on measurement, because how can we be working towards achieving the goal when we don't know what the impact is that we're achieving? And again, it's not just about impact, it's about sustainable impact. And here I think we had a lot of great elements coming out, which is first, my congratulations to Mark, the Blue Room colleagues sitting here and Mark sitting here. When we talk about impact, I was really struck during the Blue Room, and I was really inspired, because when we talk about leaving no one behind, I think the work that you are doing is really touching those people that we refer to when we leave no one behind. I won't go through all 9 or 10 examples, because there's no way I can begin to articulate them as passionately and meaningfully as you did yesterday, but that's what we need to think about when we're talking about making an impact. I think it's also very meaningful that when talking about impact, so many of you, including the minister this morning, again, the Blue Room colleagues, but also everyone during the interactions, talked about the impact that volunteering makes on us as people and as citizens. There was just a statement in the private sector meeting that I was in: creating empathy means creating better citizens. And to achieve this ambitious agenda, we need to be good citizens, all of us. I was also quite struck by a reference to volunteerism being a cohesive glue between ministries and stakeholders and citizens. Think about what that means. Think about the work that volunteers are doing if they can be the ones bringing people, bringing communities, bringing governments together. This is amazing. We talk about creating space for civic engagement, but I think if we think about volunteerism in that role, that's really a remarkable achievement. We talked about in-person volunteering. We also talked about online volunteering, and the way that online volunteering, but also many other forms of innovation, can really go hand in hand with this aspect of awareness raising, which also came up so much during the discussion. And I would say that actually innovation and awareness cuts across so many angles, but they also go very much hand in hand, again, with the partnerships and with the sustainable impact. Finally, it's something that David Nabarro said at the outset. The SDGs, as we know, they're really owned by everyone. So we have the commitment in this room, and I hope as we take this forward, first of all, us, as I'm thinking about us as UNDP, we can think about how we bring volunteerism more into our programming, more into the impact that we're working to achieve, but that we can really work together coming out of these 2 days of discussions, the contacts, the partnerships, the friendships that have been made, and really advance forward with really concrete partnerships that will result in the impact that we need and that we want to see in order to have these goals met by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pohl. I'm now honored to welcome Mr. Stefan Delps, Head of Division, International Cooperation for Sustainable Development from the German Federal Foreign Office. We would like once again to thank the German Federal Foreign Office for your continued support to the UNB program. Mr. Stefan Delps.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's great to be here with you. And when I came in yesterday, I saw the T-shirts, the blue ones, saying "Inspiration in Action." And now you hear me as a diplomat and think, where does that go together? As it was said, there is a converted community already in this room. And I cannot say the same from everyone in Berlin and not even from within my ministry. We do mostly classical diplomatic work. That means on our minds are crises, we have visa service, and we work on cultural issues. So we have a very diverse field of activities. And now it's our task, and we have a group of people within the ministry to bring the agenda into our work. And that's quite a challenge. And that's why I'm very happy to be here, to be inspired by you, because you act and you inspire us as well in our government. And I feel this family spirit here, the UN spirit, and it's much better even than in New York, because I see so many young faces here. And as you have said, there is this spirit of doing something meaningful, to bring it home. It enriches your lives and as well, of course, the lives of the people you work with. And as well, Bonn is a special place because here the agenda has many fans and people who think about them, there's an enormous intellectual capacity in this field of sustainability and of having the whole agenda there. And we hope, of course, as German government, that this place will become even more important on the mental map, of the global mental map, as a place where work is done, but as well as a place of reflection. So Bonn has its reputation of being a bit outside of the real world, because it's a nice place, as you might have seen. But it's sometimes good to be not in the center of politics, to be outside of Berlin. I wanted to mention two more things, and the one is, of course, where is the link between foreign policy and the global goals? I think one important aspect is that without stability and security, everything is in vain. We have to make sure that the environment is there where we can work for the different goals and to have them as an entity. So there is still a need for classic diplomacy, of course, but we have this vision that our normal work, where we see national interests, no matter whether it's the interests of Japan, of China, or of Burkina Faso, Peru, or Germany, to have that on our mind, that there is an even more important global interest. And that's a change process we try to animate. And the second one is that we hope that we can provide platforms for our activities as a German government, all the ministries combined abroad. So I think especially of our structures which we have as embassies, as our different organizations we provide in the development sectors and in trade. So you name them all, and we hope to involve every one of them. And the last point I want to make is this gap we have sometimes we can see between reality on the ground, crises and terror and all the challenges we face, with the beautiful world of the agenda, which we have talked about during these days. So how do we bring these together? And that's something where, of course, you make the main difference and you create a piece of the future reality. And I think that's always important to keep in mind, that we are shaping the world of tomorrow, and you can make this difference as global citizens with your empathy and with your vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delps. We will now hear the last closing remark from Mr. Richard Dictus, UNV Executive Coordinator. Please welcome Mr. Dictus.
I will take the liberty of not standing behind the podium, because I've noticed over times that it is not just what I say, but that it's also a little bit about the way that I say it. As I'm standing here, I'm actually quite overwhelmed with all the voices that we have heard in what is just a day and a half, the journey that we've had. Just today, talking about journeys, we had Mamani Baby telling us about his personal journey and how volunteerism and volunteering basically got him to what we can say is the ultimate service to the nation, and that is sacrificing his life to be a minister. And that is a sacrifice in life because you do very little else. You're still a volunteer. We've heard Saskia Schellekens talking about the engagement of young people and how we still don't seem to be able to get to the core of how we need to build them into the construct. And that we need to stop having that as something we also need to do, but it's probably the first thing that we need to do. You saw a panel after that of people who went from different sides to it. You had David from Somalia coming saying, well, okay, so if 78% of my population is below the age of 19, where do you think the primary challenge of our work at this moment lies? You had other people coming in, our colleague from Lebanon, more about, have you any idea how important it is to develop the values, the habit of service, and how, if we older people do not show that value of service, how do we instill this into younger people? And it is about the life of service, right? If we want to make the world better, then we have to give service to each other. We then went from there into two breakaway services. One that I spent most of my time in was around the private sector. And what was an incredible eye-opener there was that we had the corporate sector explaining how important volunteerism was as their engagement with sustainable development goals, indicating that this was not just something that they are doing because they think today that's a nice thing to say, but it is something that they've been doing for a very long period of time, and that they really now want to make as associated with the main trust of sustainable development goals. Because if we all pull in the same direction at the same time, then we can get this done. But let's be very clear, we now have a number of people with significant knowledge resources, significant financial resources, significant staff resources, ready and willing to pull with us at the same time. Not saying that the partnership is going to be just easy and made the next day, but it is a partnership that is in the making, and I was rather proud to hear that actually UNV may be seen as useful in this purpose. For an organization as UNV, which in the end of it is not the largest of UN organizations, being seen as a useful organization is extremely important. That's what we strive for. The conversation going on here around fully funded, by the way, that name is really bad. Because it emphasizes completely the wrong dynamic, right? It talks about money. It's not the issue. What you actually saw, you saw this demonstrated by Beatrice from UNOHCR, you saw it from Thiago, now soon to be of WFP. It's about creating global citizens. It's about creating that possibility from people to engage from their own experience base, from their national experience, global issues, and to be able to engage in that. When we start taking a look at this moment at the incredible efforts that are being made in India to completely revitalize the national service programs and bring them up to a modern construct that dynamically engage with the new issues that are in society, it is exactly that same thing. It is mobilizing the citizenship within the country, the future, the leaders for 2030, and leveraging them in to what needs to be done now. That increasingly has to have an element, I think, of also creating more and more significant numbers of global citizens. For me, there are two things that always come out when I see a Blue Room. For me, the Blue Room, something I can look forward to. The incredible stories, the inspiration. But I would like to see a Blue Room China. I would like to see a Blue Room United States. I would like to see a Blue Room Thailand, where the volunteers from the individual countries, a Blue Room India, a Blue Room Nepal, can get the opportunity to talk in the same way about how they have been able to engage in the country. So that the Blue Room construct that we put here becomes like the TEDx of volunteering. And I really can see this working really, really well, because one of the things that came out is that we are here in a room of people who know each other very well. We know what the value is, but how do we actually get that value out? And just think about, how do we reach a broader audience with that? If we are really impressed with these stories, then, you know, how further can we get that? And then further down the line, let's have a Blue Room SAP. Let's have a Blue Room Kaiser. Let's have a Blue Room for every one of the corporate sector partners that are there. So that same Blue Room construct can also inspire them to become citizens that strive towards sustainable development goals. Another realization, because now I'm talking about the whole period that we sat here, and there's so many voices at this moment that are shooting through my head at the same time. But the other realization is the fact that you know, many people said the same thing about understanding now what the Sustainable Development Goals are for and how important they were. Yeah, let's be very clear. We had China, the Permanent 5 in the United Nations, coming out very straightforward, saying this is our development agenda. This is what we need to build as a nation, and this is where China will be building as part of the global community. There is no doubt that this is important, but if we step outside of the room, and if you go outside there and ask the bus driver that is taking you back to the hotel if he has ever heard of sustainable development goals, you first have to learn Germany and German and then say, you know, Nachhaltigkeitszwecke. But, you know, that's aside. But 9 out of 10, maybe 99 people out of 100 will actually not know what we're talking about. And that means that a number, it came out in one of the discussions, it is an issue of, we have to get out of the wording and we have to get into action. And by the way, and you heard Sarah just say this, it's 14 years. We don't have all the time in the world. We do have to now start getting along to try and mobilize those forces for volunteers to be part of the construct. And there's still, I think, a lot of work that needs to be done. I hope I've given you a bit of a sense of at least my impressions and my takeaways, and the incredible sense of mission that I believe this gives to me and to my colleagues in UNV as a whole, about the role that we have to play as your organization that is useful and an organization that is a catalyst, but also as an organization that will continue to build more global citizens. I really want to change that fully funded program name. It's a terrible name. So maybe something like Global Citizens Program or Global Goals Program or something like that. And that is going to be one of the important long-range contributions that I believe all volunteer sending organizations, all volunteer using organizations are making. Let us think about all of the programs that we do, whether you are the Chinese Volunteers Federation Service, whether you are the National Service Program from India, whether you are starting on your career in WFP today. We need to make sure that every one of the volunteers that has been working in our program, and whether they've been working in our programs for 3 days or whether they've been working in our program for half a day, leave the program as an ambassador for sustainable development goals. Build this into the way that you actually set people up so that we can amplify the voices, not at a theoretical level, but as people who come out and say, I know what sustainable development goals are, and I personally have worked with my organization on making them a reality. The next telephone app, in my opinion, therefore should not be the telephone app that talks about SDG action, but should be the telephone app that starts measuring SDG action. It's a telephone app where I, at the end of the day, if I've done something useful for a sustainable development goal, and by the way, if you work for the United Nations, that should be every day, But that I just go on that telephone app and I click and I say, today I was in Bonn, Germany, and today I did this to make Sustainable Development Goals a reality. And that information should become part of all the information that is there about what other people are doing, so that we can see and that we can make visible that enormous effort that is being made, and that we can hold each other accountable for the gaps in the things that should have been happening and that are not happening. I can see, and you heard that, a number of people reflecting on the need to come up with new answers, to come up with greater levels of innovation, and how volunteers and volunteering create a space where that innovation can come out, where that innovation can be examined, and where that innovation can be leveraged in a proper way. There's somebody who mentioned a couple of years to me ago, who said, look, when you talk about innovation, you need to realize that the future has already arrived. It is just unevenly distributed. Let's unwrap that one. It means that somewhere in this big planet that we have, with 7 million people, there is somebody who has already figured out the solution to the problem. We've just not been able to spot that person. We've not been able to identify what that solution is so that we can scale it up. But this is where volunteers become so enormously important, because yes, as a group, but as individuals, they actually do spot the innovation. And anybody who's worked with volunteers will see that. Why? Because a volunteer will actually proceed from that question. Why? Why am I doing this? Why are we doing it this way? Isn't there a better way of doing it? And can't we do it a little bit faster? Because there's not enough time in the world if we continue along this pace. And that is, for me, one of the key things that will allow change to be identified, change to be upscaled, and change to be happen. Because otherwise, when I go back to the original statements, one, we need 7.5 planets of resources if we want to survive in the current way that we are developing our wealth and well-being. There's a differentiating factor in there. If we all want to live in the same way as German people live, we only need 4 planets. If we all want to live, and I'm sorry for the Americans in the room, in the way that the Americans are living, we need 7.5 planets. So the Germans are really a little bit further ahead. But if you actually take a look, if we would all be able to live in the way that Indian middle classes are living at this moment, we only need 3 worlds. Still too much, but look, there are different answers. If we cannot get to those answers, we will at a certain moment see that our way of life will break down fundamentally. If you believe that at this moment the world is a fragile place, if we do not get these SDGs right, the statement is, you ain't seen nothing yet. The second one of the starting points was leave no one behind. And you've heard the issue of the global movement that is happening at this moment, the migration of people and the refugees. We've heard that in many different ways. And the reality is, and you heard Thomas Zilberhorn articulate this in one of the panels here, is that if we actually do not make development happen, if we do not offer people an alternative within their own countries to lead a fulfilling, comfortable and good life, you will never be able to stop them getting on the road, taking all the terrible risks that they're taking. Just think about somebody from Gabon walking through the Sahara Desert to get to Libya, to get into a boat, to come to Lampedusa. The physical risks that this person has taken is not because they thought that that was a pleasurous thing to do, it was because they had no choice. Otherwise you don't do this. So leaving no one behind is not a theoretical construct of making sure that all the little children are in school. Leaving behind is a necessity if we want to have an equitable and just world where everybody finds their place and where everybody wants to live. I'm one of those strange people who made a choice in life to become a global nomad. Me, together with my wife Monique, we've been traveling the world and we're going to be traveling a little bit more. Our children do not like that at all. They basically are settling in the Netherlands because they don't believe that. They feel most comfortable at home. Me and my wife, we are exceptions. But most people enjoy life very close to where they were born. eating the food that they are used to, talking to the friends that they've had for 40 years. Let us try to see Sustainable Development Goals as a way of making that possible for everybody. The journey of the forum is ending here with these ideas. There's a small journey that's going to happen after that, and that is that this afternoon there will be another meeting on South-South cooperation. It's a slightly different space from the forum, but it is a space nevertheless that is extremely important to voluntarism. You have heard this being said, and I think ISATA is one of the key examples of that, is that we need to make sure, if we are driven by the idea of global citizens in the UN, to make sure that more countries in the world engage that opportunity of creating global citizens. More countries in the world see the opportunity of having international volunteer exchanges. And that issue of international volunteer exchanges in a South-South cooperation context is the last part of the journey we're going to make. And I hope for those of you who are interested that you will be coming back. But otherwise, for those of you who are not going to come back for another helping of interesting conversations, thank you so much for making the journey with us. Thank you so much for taking the time and the effort to come here and be with us. Thank you so much for your incredible engagement, the conversations, the stimulation that we've had. We created a little bit of an SDG bubble that we've been in for 3 or 4 days. So can I ask you please to take the energy that you got from here and take it back home and talk to your friends about it, and talk to your friends that there are places that we can create now where the whole world can be in agreement about what needs to happen in order to save mankind and to save the planet. And that it can happen in a small place called Bonn on 2 days in a rather cold autumn. I would like to thank, and I can't thank them enough, our hosts, the German government, our host, the city of Bonn, because this is a very special relationship. We are getting the opportunity to set up our stage here. We are getting the opportunity to create discussions in all the freedom and all the intellectual capacity that we can bring forward. And that is something that we value, and we don't take that for granted at all. And finally, I want to talk about all the people that made this happen. Because you see, there's a group of people that you've all seen that you can very clearly identify. They're standing in the back there and they're having their T-shirts on. And these are the volunteers from the University of Cologne. I was a little bit shocked yesterday evening when I got on my bicycle to ride home, that there were a number of them still standing outside, some of them with short trousers on, pointing the way, that's where you have to go. It was an enormous commitment, and we really, really, really are grateful and very thankful. Then there is the UNV colleagues who have all made this happen, who've been trying to get this going. At the end of the day, and on Monday morning, I will touch base with all of you individually to really express my incredible... I am in awe of you, UNV team. I am gobsmacked with what you have been able to do yet another time. It is so enormously a privilege to be able to work with you and to see, and I hope that you have yourself seen the contribution that we can make to the world, because you've just put it here on stage. You, UNV team, you did that. Can we have an applause for them? This is probably the last time that I will be taking the stage in a forum like this, talking about volunteering. There will be other forums where I hope to do something else. So I want to do something to you that I learned in Nigeria many, many years ago. And this is about sharing your power. It is about sharing what you have learned and sharing what you know, but doing that in a symbolic fashion. It is about giving honor to the people that you've worked with, and it is about respecting their capacity to carry it forward. It is symbolic, so I hope you won't mind if I just simply do this. Up to you.
Thank you, Richard. Throughout the course of the forum, we have said time and again how grateful we are to have so many crucial partners here to discuss how we can improve our work. So I personally, and from, as Richard said, thank you all again, each one of you, for being here. Just a few logistics information. I'd like to confirm that the afternoon parallel sessions are open to all of you. The first session on the roundtable discussion on South-South cooperation will be held here in this room, Santiago de Chile. And the other one, the clinics on data and measurement of sustainable development goals, will take place in room Beethoven. Just a few more people that I'd like to thank. We have the UN volunteer interns who have been working weeks and months in making this possible, and students from the Bonn International School, the UN Model Club, who were guiding you all the way, and they're also here. So a round of applause for them, please. It's been a pleasure and a privilege and a learning experience in being your master of ceremony. I thank you all for bearing with me and encouraging me. And I wish you a pleasant lunch and bon voyage to participants who are leaving after. And for the rest, please do join us for these two workshops. Thank you very much.